Hi and welcome to Squizz.com, the connected marketplace. Today I'll be showing you the latest and greatest changes we've made to the Squizz.com connector software in the 1.13 release. If you didn't already know, the Squizz.com is a free piece of software developed by us that allows a business to connect any of their business systems such as accounting, enterprise resource planning, customer relationship management, and any other systems, databases, spreadsheets, or files storing data into the Squizz.com and Totex platforms. In simple terms, the connector allows a business to save and make more money by being able to set up and automate data management and transfer between its systems and other supplier and customer systems. Now you understand what the connector can do, let's look at the changes we've added to the 1.13 release. This release adds new functionality that allows quote records to be retrieved and exported from connected business systems and data sources, allowing for customers in connected e-commerce systems to search for and view quote records in real time. Additionally, the release adds new data exports for MakeModel Data coming from connected business systems. This MakeModel Data is useful for customers to find products associated to models built and sold by manufacturers such as cars, motorcycles, printers, computers, and any other things that are built with a collection of interchangeable parts. Two improvements been added to the dataset feature to make it easier to search for records within datasets based on being able to match records in more ways, as well as usability improvements when assigning attributes to products. An improvement has been added to the connector for all adapters to be able to copy and paste data field mappings in the data imports and data exports, making it quicker and easier to set up adapters. Lastly, an improvement has been made when sending purchase orders to the suppliers through Squizz.com using the connector to be able to specify a customer account code when sending orders. This allows customers to designate a customer account in the supplier organization that orders should be raised against. This is very handy when large organizations or governments create orders for different departments, divisions, or affiliated businesses. Within the 1.13 connector release, we've added new data exports to be able to export out MakeModel data from any connected spreadsheets, databases, or any other business systems that store this kind of data and export them into connected e-commerce platforms. So if you're wondering what MakeModel Data is, it's where users can choose to find products based on knowing the manufacturer of certain products, such as in the example here we have motorcycles, and we have all the different motorcycle companies that sell motorcycles. And then once you've chosen a motorcycle, such we'll choose a Honda, then we can choose from all the models that this Honda manufacturer creates. So as you can see here, they've created a long list of different types of motorcycles. And then once we've chosen motorcycles, then the same model of motorcycle may have been released over many years. Then we can find different products that are based on this motorcycle, which we may have and we may need to get new parts for. So the MakeModel Data makes it easier for users to find the products they're looking for based on the model that has been released by a manufacturer. Now, this data is not just for motorcycles and cars. MakeModel Data is relevant for any industries where there are component products that are combined together to make complete models. So in the connector, we can now export the make or manufacturer data, the model data, so which models are sold by manufacturers, and which products can be used for that given model. The same data structures could be used for phones if you're wanting to choose a different phone. So the manufacturers could be Apple or Samsung, and then they release different models of phones every year, such as Apple's different range of iPhones and iPads, such as iPads for this current year versus the previous generation released maybe 1 or 2 years ago, as well as computers and any other kinds of devices that they decide to come up with, then you can then buy interchangeable parts or accessories for. So if we go back to the connector, in any of our generic adapters, I've already got a generic adapter here. If we open up the generic adapter settings, if we click on the data exports tab, in the export types, there have been 5 new data exports that have been added to the list. One for makers, maker models, maker model mappings, maker model mapping attributes, and maker model attributes. So if we go through each one, makers allows us to get a list of makers or manufacturers, and then to export the data from the configured data source that we've set up. We can get this MakeModel data from Microsoft SQL servers, ODBC compatible databases, any web services that support the e-commerce standards, such as other connectors. We can get the data from spreadsheet files in the CSV file format. Also get data from JSON and XML-based files or web services, or SQL-like databases. So in our example today, I've got a CSV spreadsheet file data source, which contains all the MakeModel data I'm going to be demonstrating. And we've got that configured to look in a directory on our computer where all these files are stored. And we've got some settings that can say how the CSV data is formatted within the CSV files that we're going to read it from. Once we've got our data source type set up, we just need to go through these new data exports. So for the makers, let's choose CSV files. Now we need to locate the CSV file. So if we look at this, we want to get the data out of this makes CSV file. So if we open that up in a spreadsheet application, you can see I've already got some data already set up here. So for makers, we need to set up a unique identifier. The key maker ID is a unique identifier, and this could be numbers, or it could be a combination of letters and numbers, such as I've got here in my example. We've got the codes for each of these different manufacturers or makers. We've got search codes that could be used to help searching algorithms to be able to find different makes. We've got organizations names of the manufacturers, so you can see here's the full names of these different manufacturers. We've got a short name, which is the name field. We've got ordering, so if we wanted to order these manufacturers in a different order when they're listed in different places, we can set the ordering there. We can set up labels for such as the IDs or the authority numbers, such as ABNs or any government issued identifiers here. And we can set up also an established date when this manufacturer or maker was first founded, as well as a group class to be able to classify manufacturers and group them together in different ways, such as we have here. Now, you notice with this establishment date that these dates are stored as milliseconds since the 1970 epochs, or the Unix time. Now, there's some tools online to make it easy to be able to convert these dates. So if we copy that number that's stored in here, and we open this website called currentmilliseconds.com, we can simply copy that value into there, and we see that date is the 1st of January 1958. Now, we can go the opposite way in this website, where if we want to get a date in milliseconds, we can type in the date here, type in our day and month, and then we can get the final number which represents that. And the reason why we're storing these dates in milliseconds is because it provides greater precision about when we want to set up dates for our data, and that's how the e-commerce standards that are used by the connector can allow these dates to seamlessly be copied across into different systems with a high level of precision. So if we go back into connector, we first need to put the name of the CSV file. If you had your make data across multiple CSV files, you can use the wildcard or the asterisk symbol to try to match on all files that start with makers. In our example, we've only got one CSV file, so we save those settings. Next, we click on the data fields, and this is where we've got to say that this column within this CSV file or spreadsheet file gets mapped to which field within these standards. Now, I've made this nice and easy because I've set the column names to be exactly the same as the standard data field names. So by doing that, I can simply just go and copy the values across into each of these. Another improvement we added to the connector is to be able to select multiple of these fields, click the Control-C characters, and then click the Control-V character to copy our values across into the other. So that speeds up the amount of time it takes to configure these data exports. We then need to also make these fields active if we know we're getting data out of this. So if we didn't have a column in our spreadsheet file that did not have the authority number, then we would simply not activate that field, and the adapter would not try to find data to export out for that data and simply ignore it. So now that we've got all of our fields set up that are mapped, now if these fields were named different, so instead of make a code, we just called that column code. In our data export, we just need to find the make a code field and just simply put in the name of the column that we've got up in our CSV file. And ideally, you want to be case sensitive as well. So now we've mapped this data, then that allows this data to be then exported across to the e-commerce system that we want it to go into. So after we've made all these field mappings, we'll click to reload data fields to make sure they get updated in the connector host Windows service. Now once that's done, we can close that. And if we go into the export routines for that adapter where we had it set it up, there is now the ability to choose the export makers, export models, and export model mapping. So if we choose export makers, choose our e-commerce platform that we want to export it to, click the run once off, then that make data can be then imported into the selected system we've got configured. And as well as that, we can set up scheduling, so that way we may want this data to be repeatedly automatically imported on a regular basis, such as daily or weekly or monthly. So that's our makers data export now configured. We need to do the same thing for the models. So if we go into the models, we also need to assign our CSV file formats. On my computer, I've got a spreadsheet file just for the model data. So if we look at the model data, so we've got our key maker ID. That's the unique identifier we defined here in our maker spreadsheet. So now we have, for each maker ID, we can start assigning models. So we've got a few different models. We've got, for our Toyota manufacturer, we've got two different models of cars or vehicles that we got here. We've got a Toyota Celica from 1991. We've also defined a Toyota Land Cruiser from 2016. So we've given each of those models a unique identifier with these 1, 2, and 3. Now that a model also has a code to be identified. It has a subcode, such as if for these manufacturers they put in additional codes for those products to differentiate them. We can set a full name that users would see typically. We've also got our dates, and once again, they're in milliseconds since the 1970 epoch. So that's all been set up there. And then we've also got a group class column where we can group different models based on the type they are. So we've got a coupe, a 4x4 car, and a sedan here as these three models. As well as that, so I've got car or vehicle models here. In this data, I've also got iPhones or mobile phones here. So we have two phone models. We have an iPhone X, an Apple iPhone X, and an Apple iPhone 8. So you can see them here. I've decided to use, as opposed to numeric unique identifiers, I decided to use more well-named identifiers. That is also allowed. So for our two models, we don't have any subcode for these Apple iPhones. We've just got names. We've got the dates when they release. Now, the difference between a release date and the created date is the release date is when that model first came out, when Apple announced this is now ready to go, ready to be purchased, whereas the created date could be when they actually started working on this model. So that could have been a year before the actual release date. So once we've got all that data set up, if we go back into the connector for the make models, we type in the name of the spreadsheet file, we save those settings. Once that's saved, we click on the data fields, and then we start mapping our fields from the spreadsheet file. So once again, I've set the names of all the columns to match the standards, so then I can just do a simple copy and paste, but we could just easily name those column names differently and then activate the fields that we want to export data out from. Once we've done that and reload those fields, we can now export that data out as well. The next data export that we would want to do is make model attributes. So if you look at the example data I've got set up for that, let's go into make model attributes. So this make a model attributes allows us to define any kind of information about the models that we have set up. If we look at our example data, our first model here is a Toyota Celica. We can put in more information about what that car is. So for instance, we've got an attribute profile that we set up here called car engine, and then we got an attribute called car engine cylinders. So we can specify how many cylinders this Toyota Celica model has for that car. So in the number value column here, this is where we can put in our number. So in this case, this car has 4 cylinders. And then the next car, which has a unique I2, which is the Toyota Land Cruiser, that car has 8 cylinders. And the next car after that, which is a Holden Commodore, that has 6 cylinders. So we can define any kind of attributes or additional information about these models within this spreadsheet file. Besides car cylinders, I've also defined the different styles of color that Toyota Celica model came in. So you can see we've got 3 different colors that car originally came in, which was green, blue, and white. So you can see we've got the duplicate or repetitive data for both the key make model ID, the profile ID, the attribute ID, and then we're storing these value in the string value column. So the number value column is only allowed for numbers or numeric values, whereas the string value column allows us to set text or letters and numbers and any other characters in that column. So depending on the kind of data you're setting up, you'll either put data in one column or the other. For the Apple iPhone models, I've defined 2 attributes. So we've got the colors that the phone can come in, and we've also got the different storage sizes that those different models of iPhone come in, such as 32 gig, 64 gig, and 128 gig. So we can see here we're defining our own fields. Now these profiles also need to be defined in the attribute file profiles data export there. So we also need to configure that first before we can then configure the make model attributes, since we need to define these profiles and these attribute values before we can export that data out. Otherwise the systems at the other end will go, well, there's no attribute profiles set up. So once we've got this data in place, we go into our make model attributes. Then we go into our data fields, once again mapping the column names from our CSV or spreadsheet data. Now you can see that 3 of these fields is mandatory since we cannot deactivate them. So we must have the key attribute ID, the key attribute profile ID, and the key make model ID, but we don't have to have both the number value and string value. So if we only had number values for our data, we could easily remove that column or just ignore importing the data from there. That is possible with this data export. So once we've done that, we've reloaded those fields. Once we've got the MakeModel dataset and the MakeModel attributes, the data for the attributes and the MakeModels gets combined together to make one final export. And that's why when we go into the export routines, we can only see that there are 3 exports available here. So the makers exports just the list of makers. The export maker models exports both the list of models as well as the model attributes. And the last one is the make model mappings exports both the mappings of products to models as well as attribute data for those mappings. So if we look at that final sets of data, if we go back into that adapter, if we click on the maker model mappings, and we look at our example data for that, the data for this export allows us to assign products to specific models in certain categories. So if we look back at our website here that was selling motorcycle products, you can see that when we go into a model, such as this Honda CRB 1000F that was made in 1995, we have a number of categories of where products can be assigned to this given model. So if we go under the batteries, we can see that there are all these different kind of batteries that can be purchased for this one motorcycle. This product, this Dynabolt battery, needs to be assigned to a category for that specific model. And this is what we do within this data. So we've got our unique identifier, our key make model ID for our models. We've got the category in the second column, and we've got the product, the unique identifier of the product in the third column. So if we look at this, we've got a cheap all-roads tire product that is being assigned to the tires category for the Toyota Celica model. And there are 4 of those tires that need to be purchased to work with that model. And if we look at the next product, we have a windscreen blade that can be installed on this Toyota Celica. So that's being assigned to the windscreen category. And there's 2 of those windscreen blades that need to be purchased to be able to work with that model. Now separately, we've got our 2 different iPhone X and iPhone 8 models here, and we're assigning 2 different kinds of batteries to these phones that can be purchased. So we can buy a generic or a aftermarket battery for those phones, or we can buy the Apple genuine battery for those phones as well. So if we were selling mobile phones on our website, we may allow the user to choose from the genuine or from the generic branded batteries for those phones. And you can see that we only need one of those batteries to work with one of those iPhone X models. And then we've got an example here where we can assign 2 different types of headphones to these iPhones, such as if we were selling accessories for these phones. So with all that data set up there, if we go back into the generic adapter, we also put in the name of our CSV file. Then we click in the data fields, and then we map each of our fields. We're not using all the fields in our example data here. We only care about product data. This download and labor data is also different types of products we can assign to them, but that's not relevant in our example here. So we assign all those fields and reload the fields to update that in the connectors window service. The last export we need to configure is the maker model mapping attributes. If we look at this data, so I have a spreadsheet file for that. If we look at the windscreen blade premium product for the Toyota Celica car model, in the windscreen category that the windscreen blade premium product has been assigned to, we have assigned an attribute here called windscreen blade left length. Because there are 2 blades that go on a Toyota Celica car, we can set attributes that for the left hand side blade, that we need to set the length of that to 35, and that could be in 35 centimeters. And for the right length, we could define that it needs to be set for 20 centimeters. So we can set attributes for when a product is specifically assigned to one model. There may be configurations or certain pieces of information that need to be configured when that product is assigned to that model. So this is one example where we have additional information about how we need to cut the blades and set the blade lengths when installing this windscreen blade onto this Toyota Celica model, and this product may be cut in different lengths across different cars. For the different iPhone models, we're assigning the same generic branded battery to the battery category, and then we've set up attributes for when this battery is assigned to that model of iPhone, what is the expected life of that battery. So we can see for this generic branded battery, for the iPhone X, we expect it to last for 2 years. Whereas if we assign that same battery to the iPhone 8 model, we expect that battery life to be 1.5 years. So there's examples of where you would assign attributes to these make model mappings. So if we go back into the generic adapter, we put the name on the CSV file. In the data fields, we then also map all the fields that we have defined within our CSV spreadsheet. Then we save all that data and reload the data fields to update the Windows host service. Then we can export all the make model mapping and attribute data. So it's important to note that before you export the make models and make model mappings, you first need to run the product attributes data export, because the product attribute data export defines the attribute profiles that need to be first installed into the configured e-commerce platform where the data is going to. Once we've done that, then we can run the export make models and export make model mappings. Now, if you don't have attribute data set up for either of these exports, then we don't have to worry about doing that process. We can just export that data. The other system will ignore trying to import attribute data. So it gives you a wrap up of how to export make model data. Like I was saying earlier, we can export this data from not just spreadsheet files, we can export it from many other different data sources based on wherever that make model data is living. Now, you could have many makes and models, such as thousands upon models, especially if you're working in the automotive industry. Then you may want to get that data from other suppliers or customers first, and then configure a generic adapter to be able to then retrieve that data out and export it to your e-commerce platform with your products assigned to it. Within the 1.13 connector release, we've made a number of small improvements to the dataset feature. So from within the connector, if we click on the datasets tab and we've got a dataset set up, if we click on the view button, within the dataset window, if we click on the attributes tab, within the product attribute values tab, we've now added the ability for, if you have many different attributes defined, such as we have here, we have a number of attributes. When you scroll across, you can now choose to lock the product columns so that they no longer scroll. A checkbox has been added here. If we tick that and then we use the scroll button, you'll see that the column, that these first product columns no longer scroll. And this makes it easier if you're managing many different columns of attributes, so you're assigning different attributes against your different products, that you don't have to keep continually scrolling to the product columns and then across to the attribute column. So it makes it easy to assign values to the products. And this is particularly handy when you've got tens or hundreds of different attributes that you need to set values for your products. If we go back into the datasets feature, we've added additional ways to be able to find different records by being able to match on different operators. We've added the equals, not equal to starts with and end with operators that we can then filter records from. So if we want to find all products that have the name equal to web freight, if we select the name field, choose the equal field, and then put in that value and click the find button, we can now see that there's only one product that exactly matches the web freight text that we've put in there. If we only had web, you can see that no matches are found because there's no products that have exactly the web word within the name. So the equals is an exact match that it's looking for. Now note that this is case sensitive. So if we typed in web freight again, but we put a small f as opposed to a big F and click the find, you can see that it is unable to find records with that value. So we need to be matching case sensitive. So if you want a match that is less sensitive, it would be better to use the contains operator. So the not equal to, we can also use that. So we want to find all products where the name doesn't exactly match web freight. So we click that, you can see here's all the rest of the products that don't have the name web freight within it. And then we've got this starts with and ends with. So we may want to find all products that start with the word cooler. So if we click the find reload, you can see that there are all these products start with the text cooler in its name, and as has a different set of values. We can do the opposite if we choose the ends with operator. So we may want to find all products that end with the word medium in its name and start with anything. So we can now see that there are two products that have the word medium at the end of its name and have different text that appears before that. These additional search operators are available not just for products, we can also use them for finding categories, we can use them for finding sale unit data, we can use them for finding attribute data, as well as the product combination data. So these should help you make it even easier and quicker to find the records that you're looking for by being able to have many different ways in order to be able to quickly search over many thousands of records within your data set, which should hopefully lead to being able to set up data quicker, get the data to where it needs to go quicker as well. So it should be a helpful time saver. In the Connector 1.13 release, in the Supplier Account Inquiry feature, which allows us to load up purchase orders for suppliers and send them off to the suppliers if they are using the Squizz.com platform, If we then tick our purchase orders and then click the Procure button, in the Procure dialog, we can now specify both the supplier organization ID, so that's the ID that that organization has within the Squizz.com platform, as well as optionally now a supplier's customer account code. Now this is useful if we want to send these orders across to a specific account that our supplier has assigned to our customer organization. And the reason for this is because if you are a large organization, then you may have different accounts set up with your supplier for each of the divisions or departments within that business. Or if you are a business that orders on behalf of a number of other businesses, you may have accounts set up for each of those businesses you're ordering on behalf of. So this allows you to clearly separate the customer accounts, or also known as debtor accounts, within the associated supplier organization that those orders are going against. And this is particularly useful when you are a large business or government entity in order to get those orders across and into Squizz. So within Squizz, we would first find the ID of, say, our supplier organization. So I have an example company here called Downtown Office Supplies. If we look in Downtown Office Supplies, they may have many customer accounts set up. If we get the account code, so if we look at that, we've got this account code called EOFS002, so we would copy that into our customer account code field. We get the ID of the supplier organization. If we are ordering as Exquisite Services, we can go into its profile, go into organizations, and we can see we've got a relationship set up with Downtown Office Supplies, and then we can get its organization ID from there, and then we can copy that into here. And then we can then click the button to submit these two purchase orders across to Downtown Office Supplies, where they will then be processed, and Downtown Office Supplies can then ship out the ordered products that we raised here. The last improvement we've added in the 1.13 connector release is the ability to export customer account inquiry quotes or quote records from connected accounting, ERP and other business systems across into the associated e-commerce platforms that we're using. So we've created two new data exports. If we click on the settings button for our generic adapter again, there have been two new data exports that have been added called customer account record quotes, as well as customer account record quote lines. So customer account record quotes allows us to retrieve the details of one or more quote records, and then the customer account record quote lines allows us to retrieve the details of a number of lines that exist within a quote record. So these quotes are useful for if a sales rep or a staff member raises a quote within the business's ERP or accounting system, and then that quote then needs to be displayed on the connected e-commerce platform. So this allows us to set up the queries that allow to export that data out. If you're using the generic adapter, you are going to want to use one of the database-based data source types to export this quote record data, such as an SQLite server, ODBC, or an associated web service that allows us to retrieve quote records. So if we take an example, we're going to use an SQLite database. We would then go into here. We would choose our data source type, would enter the name of the table where the quote records are stored. So if we had a table called quotes, we'd put it into there. We'd put in some custom conditions. We would put in some custom conditions to be able to filter the records that we are looking for. Now, if we go to the Squizz.com Doc Center and click on the generic adapter, if we scroll down to the data export section, if we look at the documentation for this data export, we can see that there are a number of hooks that we've got available for SQL-based databases where we can put in clauses on how we want to filter quote records that are returned as. So typically we're going to put in a filter that says that we only want to get quotes when they're assigned to a specific customer account ID or unique identifier. So we'd typically put in a where clause that says only get quotes associated to a given record, and now so the value of this hook will change based on the user who's requesting this quote information. Now additionally, we're going to want to put it in a where clause that allows them to do all the filtering of those records by date or based on being able to match certain fields. So in the documentation, we've also got these where clause hooks where we can say how we want to match records on based on date. Now, depending on the dates are stored in the database, we want to use this where clause if the dates are stored as a Unix timestamp long integer representation within milliseconds since the 1970 epoch. But if the data coming out of the database can be matched on a string date format, such as 1970-05-01, the 1st of May, then we may want to use the where clause date string matching, since the query that is generated by the adapter will be looking to match on strings as opposed to numbers. So if we took that, most likely the standard way you're going to do date matching, we would put that into here as well to put all of our different where clauses. And those where clauses will change between filtering records between date ranges, as well as being able to search on certain fields based on the fields that the user is searching on in the associated e-commerce platform. So for quotes, they could be quote numbers. Then this hook will get replaced with the actual field name that we use in order to store the quote number. So once we've got our where clauses set up, we click the save button to be able to save those settings. Then if we go into the data fields, this is where we have to go through each of the table column names within our data source, then put in the name of the column associated to the corresponding e-commerce data field where we get that data out. So if we're in our quote record, we've got a billing address, then in our database, it might be called bill to address. And that may have an address field there. So then we could go, and if there was only, say, 2 fields that store address information within our accounting or ERP system, then we may only be able to use those fields there. So we have to go through here, and there is quite a number of fields that we can display for quotes, such as anything to do with freight information, location-based information. We can put in sales rep information, as well as all of our different totals. So there's quite a lot of different fields that are available. So we just need to go through, choose the fields which our system supports, put in the names of those table fields, and then we can go off, and the connector, it can build the final SQL queries that in real time can then retrieve that information out and return it to the system that the connector is connected to. So that gives you a brief overview of how to set up quotes using the generic adapter, as well as that. Within the Micronet adapter, we've already done a lot of this hard work for the Micronet distribution system that is set up there. So if we go into its data exports, you can see there has been another data export added for the customer account record quote. And this already has the name of the table where the quote data is stored in that system, as well as the where clauses. So that way we can then match and find those quote records in that system, as well as the fields have been also defined here, as you can see here, and they've already been enabled based on the fields we could find. As you can see here, there are a number of other fields that even this system does not have any data available for. So in the future, we could turn on and off different fields and set data based on the underlying data that is supported in the Micronet system. So this functionality adds additional capabilities to the connector to now retrieve out quote information. Then those quotes could be converted back into sales orders and resubmitted back to the connector, which then they would appear back here, allowing the quotes to go through as confirmed orders and closing the loop on this feature. So that gives you a wrap-up of the Connector 1.13 release. As always, you can find more information about the connector by going to the squizz.com/docs/connector documentation center, where you can find a whole range of additional information about how the connector can be set up and configured. And if you have any further questions on how to work with the connector, you can also go to squizz.com, click on the profile link in the footer, and then post a question within the squizz.com connector feed, and we're happy to answer your questions there. And as always, if you want to receive future notifications about the changes we're making to the connector software, subscribe to the Squizz.com YouTube channel to automatically receive notifications when we upload new content. Till next time, thanks for taking the time to listen, and have fun with the connector.